So, as I walk around here, what's the thing I notice by their absence? It's Chinese bikes. Right, hello everybody. So don't worry, I'm not going to hold Top Gear on you. But we're out in the Mini, and it is freezing cold today. Temperatures are dropping, so I'm hoping we're going to get some more filming done this week. But I thought it'd be interesting to look at where I think the market's going to be this coming year, 2026, for motorbikes, and who are going to be the winners and losers, and what do I think are the bikes people are going to be looking at? What sort of bikes are going to suffer or just flatten out on sales and stuff like that? So I thought there might be quite an interesting look today. But I thought I'd bring the Mini with my 25-year-old Mini, the family heirloom that is the Mini Cooper, with its pincushion roof. It's fantastic. But it's got about 100. We don't even know how many miles are on it now because the little dash thing doesn't work, which is typical of BMW type Mini. But we think we're probably looking at about 180 to 190,000 miles now. But it still goes great, and it still looks fantastic actually. And we're thinking of taking this one down to Monaco this year, which will be 2026. Just for the hell of it. Well, that's the plan. Probably be in the autumn. I think we might do that. Head down to the house and then head down to Monaco just for a bit of fun. I don't know why, it just seemed like a good idea. Right, let's head off because I need somewhere to go and do this video, which will give me an overview of lots and lots of different bikes. And there's only one place near here, which they're always happy for me to film in there, which is fantastic. It's a Superbike factory at Crawley. So this is not about bike prices or anything like this, but it's just I'm going to use them as props. I'm going to use bikes as props that they've got in there. And I think it'd be interesting what they've got a lot of, which will indicate one thing, and what they've got a lot not of, if that makes sense. Because I think there's also an interesting point to make about Chinese bikes and companies like Superbike Factory. So come on, let's go. Let's waste no more of your time. It starts, look at that. It starts marvellous. I've only got one warning light as well, straight. Right, I'll see you when we get here. You can enjoy some of the lovely countryside. Right, so here we are, back at the Superbike Factory. Fantastic place to do this sort of video. Been speaking to the chaps, and that's so good. They're always so welcoming, kind to let me do this sort of stuff. And I'm not selling any product, so it's really good. So I thought we'd get on with it because it's actually, I'll show you, it's quite busy. It's quite busy today, and that's really good, isn't it? And we're sort of right in that middle bit of after Christmas and New Year. So, but they are one of the few shops that's broken, which is really good. So I thought I'd start with adventure bikes. What's the adventure bike market going to do this year? Well, and I've been talking to the guys, and they're saying they're similar to me that the big adventure bikes are flattening out. So when you look at, we know that the GS, when the GS 1300 came out, that had a sort of lukewarm reception, which made these bikes, particularly the 1250, really sought after. But they got a few in here. They got a few of the 1250 GSs in here, and I think that they're flat. I think the demand for these was very short, and I think that's the problem. And when you look at things like the 1200. I think that's suffering as well because people don't want earlier models now. I think the 1300 is superseded, but people don't want the earlier models, and I think it's happening with the 1250. I think when you get a really nice 1250 like this, I think there's a market here. but it has, the tide has turned on these, and I think I said before in my last video that the 1300 came out. That was a tipping point in the big adventure bike scene, and I think that's where we are with these. So I don't expect to see a lot more big adventure bikes coming on the market, any new models coming out. I think we're going to see the dealers concentrate, or the manufacturers concentrating on the smaller to mid-range size. But it's still a beautiful bike. I'm trying to get a ride on the new 1300. I'm just waiting for the BSA dealer to get back to me, so hopefully they will. But yeah, I think the big adventure bike market is flat, and I think it will see it continue to flatten out and drop this year. So what about the classic retro market? Well, the Triumphs are evergreen, aren't they, really? And I think some of these will continue to sell, particularly things like the Speed Twins, the Bonnevilles. I still think the T120 and the T100 are just a fantastic bike. And they still are the premier classic retro, aren't they, out there? I mean, they're stunning. I would love that. I would love that. I think that's such a pretty bike. T120 water cooled. Love to get a ride on that. But there are plenty of them in here, and I think it's interesting to think when I was saying to you, what have you got a lot of, which might be being struggled to sell. You've got a lot of, the adventure bikes. There's a lot of classics in here. I thought it's worth just mentioning this, because this is an interesting update that they're doing here. So you don't actually have the cash price, if you like, anymore. You have the credit price, and you have to scan the code. It gives you the up-to-date price. And I thought this when I saw this the other day. So their pricing is quite dynamic, in that they have people looking at the current retail prices of the bikes and then adjusting them accordingly to what the market's doing there and then. It's a bit like Auto Trader, but it's not Auto Trader, but it's a similar sort of system. So that's where you don't see the buy it now price on here, which you used to have. Just thought I'd let you know that. This is an interesting little aside, and I think these are a hot ticket this year, because people are doing a lot of green laning. Are going to be these little enduro, off-road enduro type bikes. Would you call it an enduro? I don't know what you call that, but you know what I mean. And the little Hondas and that Cove 300 and stuff like that, or the Vosges 300 Rally, stuff like that, are really popular, aren't they? They're sort of cheap enough that you can buy it and leave it in the garage. But yeah, these are a hot ticket this year. These are a hot ticket, and that market's going to do well. Here's another market that I think is pretty flat. It has a sort of a customer base, but the big tourers, the BMW RTs and stuff like this, will go on forever. But it's just the manoeuvring of it, isn't it? Getting it around. It's something you don't want to go shopping on it. You want to go across Europe on it. And that's a lot to lug around, isn't it? A lot to lug around. Beautifully comfortable though, but I think the market in big tourers is going to see a big decline this year as well. I really do. So it's bargains to be had, but it doesn't matter how cheap you make it. If you don't want it, you don't want it. Here's an interesting point. KTMs. Now the KTMs, they had a lot of KTMs here, and they're saying that they're starting to move. They're starting to shift, the KTMs. So does that mark a turnaround in KTM's fortunes a little bit? I hope so. But they are saying that they're selling KTMs. And I remember when this place opened, and they had, I think, pretty much all the KTMs from P&H, but looking very absent, which is interesting, isn't it? What about the Multistradas? Now, Multistradas are beautiful bikes, but an expensive bike, but they're pretty cheap. I've seen the price drop of these now second hand. Are people thinking that the cost of servicing and running these bikes is getting a bit much, even though they are pretty reliable as far as I can tell? I think we see the market in Multistradas drop. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Multistradas drop, but KTMs go up. These seem to hold their price though. The Desert X's, I love these. I think if money was no object, I'd have a Desert X. But I think again, it's that, we're at the high end of the adventure bike market. This is a bike you always promise yourself, but it's an expensive piece of kit. And I've seen these in here for some time now. these Desert X's, but beautiful bikes. But I think they'll be victims of the decline in the big adventure bikes. Possibly the same with things like this. You know, what's gonna do for the Tenere a little bit this year, I think, will be the Chinese copies of this. I mean, what do we have, which is now selling really, really well, is that Vosges DSX 800 Rally. I know this is the Super Tenere, it's not the same as the 700 or 800, but that's going to hit that market, I think. That I'm going to talk a bit more about Chinese bikes in a minute, but I think that's where the Chinese have made good inroads into some of this stuff. And again, it's, you know, what the Chinese are best at is just making carbon copies of something else to a certain extent. So this is one of the surprises that I've been told about today, is that actually the sports bike market is really on the up again. People are buying second-hand sports bikes, and that's interesting, isn't it? I never thought the sports bike market was buoyant, because it's slightly a one-trick pony, I suppose. That's probably upset a few people, but people are buying them and taking them off to, you know, Spain and track daying them and stuff like this. So the market in sports bikes is actually very good, and these bikes are not expensive. You know, people know about things like the Speed Triple, the RSs and stuff, where they're pretty uncomfortable bikes. But people are buying them and using them what they were designed for, to go racing. So interesting. So the sports bike market seems to be quite hot at the moment, and their sales figures over the Christmas period is reflecting that. They're selling a lot. They're selling a lot of sports bikes. So who knew? Who knew? By somebody who doesn't ride sports bikes. Ginormous cruisers. Is it a cruiser? You know, Rocket 3, stunning bikes. But where's the market for those now? Is it in America? I just don't think it's here. I don't think it's in the UK now. And you look at these earlier Rockets, you know, I don't think they've aged well. And although they're phenomenal bikes and amazing engines, it's difficult to see where the market in these is going to go. They were more like a design study, weren't they, really, I suppose? But interesting bikes. But yeah, I don't think I'd want to pay £360 a month to ride that. But I'll give you what I think is going to be one of the best sellers of this year, and that's going to be the Scrambler genre. I think the Scrambler's pretty hot at the moment. I think there's a market for it, and I think the winners are going to be people like Triumph, aren't they? You know, they've updated their line of Scramblers. You've got more and more 400s now, which will fill that gap. You've got the Enfield Bear, and I think the Scrambler market is pretty hot at the moment. The new 900, I think Triumph looks fantastic. But you've also got bikes like this, which were becoming real bargains, actually, these R9Ts. And now I think the market wants them now. The other thing I think will come up in this will be people buying Interceptors and turn them into Scramblers, because they are a cheap buy. You know, and you can pick up a low mileage Interceptor and have at it with your angle grinder. But interesting bikes. Love an Interceptor, great value. I mean, just, you know, for somebody who wants to get into that sort of vibe, £68 a month, I suppose it's cheap, isn't it? You know, I'm not going to comment on the cost of the finance, but it's a bike you can do a lot with, isn't it? Do a lot with. This is an interesting part of the market, isn't it? The Harley, and you've got to think that, you know, there are a hardcore bunch of fans of Harley Davidson in the UK, and I think there'll always be a market for them. I think the problem that Harley have is their current management and what direction they're doing with their new bikes. But I think for second-hand Harleys, I think there's always a market. I really do. You know, cheap Harleys, they don't really exist, do they? And when they do come up for sale, they go instantly. People want them because they're easy to work on. And essentially they are pretty reliable, really, aren't they? But there's always a ready supply of these. But I think it's the new bikes which are going to cause Harley Davidson a problem with their management. So as I walk around here, what's the thing I noticed by their absence? It's Chinese bikes. Now, you could argue, well, you know, the modern Chinese adventure bikes and that, they're still too new to the market. But you know as well as I do that people buy their bikes 6 months later, they change it, and you don't see them here. And I think that's indicative of dealers like this, in that why would you touch a Chinese bike when you're still not sure what the market's doing in terms of you know, repairs, warranties and stuff like that. And I think that's the key at the moment. And I don't think the Chinese bike market will mature properly in the UK until dealers like Superbike Factory come on board and start taking them in, because they're happy that the supply chain and repairs and parts supply is viable financially, and I don't think it is at the moment. I'm not saying that the bikes are bad; they're not at all. You know, I was talking to one of the chaps here who was saying, you know, there's no such thing as a bad bike these days, really. But I think you will know when the Chinese brands have really got a foothold in the UK is when you see dealers like this with them, and I think that's the thing with the Chinese market. You know, we don't see Chinese bikes in here. I remember seeing 125, one of them hoodlum things, you know, and you know there's certainly a market for them, but not through here. I'm not saying that comes as a risk averse, but they're not ready to take the plunge, I think, in a big way with Chinese bikes yet. So that's interesting, isn't it? And this is why a really good barometer of the UK bike market. Yeah, we'll wait and see that. I thought we'd just have one last look at what bikes have been sold, and that'll give you an idea of what's actually sold in the last sort of like couple of days. And you get an idea of, I think, of a little snapshot of the market. So is just like a snapshot, isn't it? So out of the 20 odd bikes you've got in here, 14 of them are sports bikes. And that sort of bears out what the guys are saying, that sports bikes seem to be selling at the moment, which is, I find, really surprising. You've got 1, 2, 3 adventure-ish bikes here, and then you've got a couple of cruisers, Harley. So interesting, isn't it? But I do want to show you this. Someone's got himself a really lovely Christmas present, because I think that is an absolutely stunning Harley. That if Harley could keep making a bike like that, they'd do really well. That's a beautiful bike, isn't it? Stunning. 12. I couldn't tell you the model. I have no clue on Harleys, even though I've got one myself. I just buy what I like the look of. That's lovely. Lovely tank. Right, so there we are. That's my views on what's going to be hot and what's not next year in the bike market, or this year rather. And I think the key ones is I think the big adventure bike market is now flat. I think we see a decline in that. I think we're going to see a lot more smaller adventure bikes coming into the market, hopefully. Yeah, if that's, you know, the market you want to be into, and I think it's going to be small adventure bikes. I think the Scrambler market is going to be pretty hot, although there's still a limited number of bikes in that area. I think, you know, Triumph have got it pretty cornered, and Enfield, you know, they could do with a real dedicated Scrambler. It'd be nice if they turn maybe a Hunter into a proper Scrambler. Wouldn't that be interesting in there? Or maybe put the 450 engine in it, something like that. So yeah, but in general I think it's the bigger bikes. But the one that surprised me, certainly from Superbike Factory, was with the sports bikes, which seems to be doing really well, which is amazing, really. But there you are. Thanks to Superbike Factory for letting me film in there. They're always very kind to me in there, and I never do a sell for them or anything. It's just they let me in there and they let me film, and I always appreciate that. So thanks, then, for the discussion I had with a couple of chaps in there. Right, thanks everybody, and I will see you on Wednesday. Take care. See you at the Bike Club.